Well, as we continue our off day series, if you will, here on Locked On Capitals, John Walton comes back to talk about how the Caps have looked coming out of the break here on Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Capitals. I am your host, as always, the insider to the insiders, Tyler Kuhl. It is Thursday. We only have one more day to go. There's a hockey game tomorrow. I know, it's okay. We're ready. We are ready for some hockey here in Washington. Now, granted, yes, that's because of COVID issues and obviously pandemic restrictions in Canada, because once again, if it were normal time, we'd probably still be reeling ourselves from the Montreal game that would have been on Tuesday. But we are not because of that. So that's why we're still talking about not playing hockey. But don't worry, we'll talk about the Washington Capitals here in just a moment's time with someone that may know a thing or two about this team. But first, guys, I got to say thank you very much for listening and watching this episode of Locked On Capitals. As always, free and available on all platforms because we don't want you to pay for this stuff. Why would you when you can get it for free on the Locked On Capitals YouTube channel and or wherever you get your favorite podcasts? Spotify, iHeart, Google, Apple, TuneIn, Odyssey. There's a couple probably other weird sites we're on there as well, but we're everywhere. Megaphone, of course, we're there as well. Wherever you, like I said, wherever you listen, because, if you're like today, for example, where I'm here in West Michigan, where it's blizzarding outside, it's about 10 feet of snow out there, not 10 feet, but a lot of snow. So yeah, you wouldn't want to drive anywhere, so you can watch us comfortably. And if you have to somehow drive through bad snowy weather, you can just listen to me, soothe your nice calm drive. Make sure you don't get too stressed out, because the last thing you need me to do is start yelling and make you go at the steering wheel, because that would be bad. That'd be bad for sure. But with that, we're going to quickly turn things over here because we got a lot to get to today about the Capitals. Even though there's no hockey on, there's a lot to talk about. Let's talk about it with John Walton, the play-by-play voice, radio play-by-play voice of the Washington Capitals here next. But before we get to that, guys, I got to tell you about our good friends at BetOnline. They'd like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue the march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive the 50% welcome bonus on the first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, do not wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. And as we mentioned off the top of the show, once again, we are joined again by the radio play-by-play voice of the Washington Capitals. Welcome back to the program, John Walton. John, how you doing today, sir?
I'm well, Tyler. How are you?
I am good. Getting ready when we're done here to go shovel about 3 feet of snow off my driveway and maybe some off the roof. But other than that, not too bad. Not too bad at all. I heard the Washington, D.C. area got a little bit of snowfall this past week. But then again, down there, it doesn't snow quite as much as it does up here in the mitten.
Yeah, not by a long shot. We hadn't seen significant snow like we saw this week in about 3 years. So we had a little fun with that on our show Sunday during the Devils game right off the top, because we usually don't have weather to talk about. But we did this time, and thankfully a lot of it's starting to melt and regress. And just in time for maybe a little bit more snow before the weekend. We'll see. But yeah, it's been a little snowier this winter than we would have thought.
Yeah, I was about to say, and then the Capitals, of course, going to Minnesota on Saturday, and they only had a little bit of snow during that -5-degree winter classic last Saturday. But let's talk about the Caps here. They've had a few days off, obviously, as we mentioned, because of the fact that Montreal pushed a lot of their home games back to later in the year. So hopefully they can have fans. Obviously, COVID still running rampant across North America, more so north of the border here. But this is given a few extra days off for the Capitals. But with that, compared to some other breaks we've seen, John, no shortage of storylines here, because the big one that came out of practice yesterday and now into today, Dmitry Orlov not practicing. That is obviously a big loss, because I think he's had a great season so far for the Capitals. What do we know the extent of this injury, or is this something that they're going to try to reevaluate Friday before the game against the Blues?
Well, it sounded like from practice today that head coach Peter Laviolette wanted to at least keep the door open that he could, in fact, maybe go against St. Louis on Friday. He's officially listed as day-to-day with an upper body injury. I don't know that we know the extent except the part where it's day-to-day, so I don't know that it's anything overly serious. As I had said on our show on Caps this morning yesterday, if it's a day that ends in Y, it must be bringing news as far as the Capitals and injury and illness these days. And unfortunately for him, he's one of 4 guys, only 4 at this point, that have played in every game. And if he's unable to go on Friday against St. Louis, that list is at least going to be down to 3. And we are not even halfway through the season yet. So the injuries, the illness, still no TJ Oshie at practice, still no Nick Backstrom, at least Connor McMichael came back. I feel like we need to travel around with a team doctor to give us some perspective these days, Tyler, because it seems like every day it's something else. But they've been able to fight through it and stay near the top of the standings, even though they have had plenty of excuses they could use if they needed them.
Yeah, because the stat line is still, or the note is that the fact that the Capitals still have not had the full originally scheduled roster at one point this year, where they're Backstrom being out for the first couple months of the season, and then when he came back, there was either Kuznetsov out somewhere, some way, someone was out of the lineup. But yet, as of we're doing this right now, they are tied with the New York Rangers for the top spot in the Metro and the entire National Hockey League, might I add. But the crazy part is the fact that, or trying to figure out with Orlov being out of the lineup, I try to dissect it when I first heard the news. I'm like, all right, who fits into this role? Because dare I say, the crazy part was, we're talking about how many guys are out of the lineup. With the taxi squad being there were 8 defensemen on the ice, including Orlov yesterday. And that includes a guy like Michael Kempny and Dennis Cholowski. Is there who of the defensemen that are dressed and healthy for the Capitals, who do you think is the guy that you would see jumping into that role where Orlov had left? Because, like I said, he'd been playing some pretty good hockey.
He's been playing some great hockey, and I think, he fills almost as many roles on this team as John Carlson does. And as well as he's been playing, I would say that he and Nick Jensen defensively might be the 2 best for the team this year. Jensen himself missing a couple of games, only getting now back to speed after his COVID absence. But I think Michael Kempny is probably your guy. And some of that is just because if Dmitry is pressed into service to move up the roster, and he has been called upon that recently, Michael Kempny's a guy who's played with John Carlson before. He's also available now to play, in a 5-6 type role if need be. And it is fortunate, and I don't know that Michael would have seen it that way, but the Caps had enough depth and had enough faith back at the beginning of the season to put Martin Fehérváry in the top 6. And Michael had a tough training camp where he was trying to get back after essentially 2 years away. And it wasn't really that much of a surprise he ended up with Hershey. But it's great that he's around now, because with all of the adversity the D-Corps has sustained, Fehérváry is trying to work himself back in after missing some time. He's been out since Christmas Eve with COVID, but at least finally got back on the ice at practice this week. So some good news there. Fehérváry, certainly, you would think if he's 100% and good to go, he's going to play with Carlson again. That's where he's been with most of this season. And then Kempny probably would mismatch depending on Orlov's availability. I mean, he may be in the lineup anyway, but certainly if Fehérváry is good to go, Kempny could be back to be in the 7th if Dimitri's fine. If not, I think it's Michael that probably plugs in there. And if he needs to go 16, 18 minutes, I don't know that that's a big deal at this point. He's played consistently for Hershey all year, and he's gotten his NHL sea legs underneath him again here in these last couple of weeks. So hopefully he could be a pretty good replacement option.
You mentioned Kempny because, we talked about him in the preseason. This was going to be his triumphant return, and it just unfortunately didn't work out. But then he comes back later on in the year, obviously due to injuries and what have you. He gets a point in that first game, right? Gets a point. I remember the play vividly. It was a simple D-to-D in the Washington zone. It goes up to Carl Hagelin. Hagelin finds Nick Dowd. The celebration's going on, and the first thing you see when the camera zooms in on Nick Dowd, he's looking right at Michael Kempny, because they all know that that's a big point for a guy like him, given how long it's been. Let's put it this way. The pandemic was not a thing the last time Michael Kempny was in the National Hockey League, kids. That's how long ago this was. how big of a story it is for him to, even though, like we said, he may be the 7th guy this weekend, that just may be how it is. But the fact that he's able to make it back to the National Hockey League after all the chaos he's had over the last now 20 months and counting.
It's one of the easiest things when a guy gets sent down that's been in the NHL for a while, Tyler, to go down and sulk and feel sorry for themselves and, wonder how did this happen? And you hear that a lot with guys that have spent a lot of time in the NHL and suddenly they find themselves in a position they really couldn't have envisioned. And for Michael, with all of the bad luck and all the adversity that he's dealt with, the injury originally that set him back in 2020, he was back there and, not being able to, he was just ramping up and available for the playoffs, and then he was gone, and then he doesn't play all of last season. I mean, it's just been really, really problematic for him to try and stay healthy. And everything I heard from talking with Hershey Bears head coach Scott Allen and the folks down in Chocolatetown say that he could not have taken this any better. Being a mentoring figure for the kids in the room, a guy who's a Stanley Cup champion, a guy who's played on a couple of different NHL teams, a guy that could have gone down there and been grumpy about it, especially when he didn't make the team out of camp. And certainly that doesn't feel very good either. But, he was a tremendous influence on everyone down there and wanted to be able to work his way back. And then I'm so glad, and I think everybody in this organization is glad that he was able to do it. And where he fits in, I mean, look, if this team does have the wherewithal to make a deep Stanley Cup run, if there is one thing that we learned in 2018, and any team that ever wins and they look back and say, boy, I'm sure glad we had 8 defensemen, 9 defensemen, 10 defensemen, whatever it is, and you can go deep enough that you can withstand an injury or two because they're going to happen. To be able to have Michael in the system, I mean, I think if he hangs around long enough, I mean, a lot of teams out there would probably say, oh, maybe we take a flyer on him. So, I think he's probably, hopefully for his sake in the NHL for good. If he's not, then you probably have to worry about waivers if he's here for too long. But I hope that he's around come playoff time, and it wouldn't surprise me at all, given the experience he had with the Caps in 2018. Be nice to have that voice back in the locker room again.
Yeah, having all veterans on deck in the postseason is big, and obviously you're the roster gets a little bit bigger. Obviously, there's the Black Aces are very important come playoff time, as we've seen in the past. One of the other stories that came out of yesterday's practice, Ilya Samsonov left the ice with a trainer. It was at the end of practice, from what we heard. Any cause for concern there, or is that just kind of maybe a little hard practice? Just needed a night to rest it up.
Yeah, hopefully it's just that and not a big deal. I mean, I think when you see the workload that this team has had lately, where they haven't had a lot of games, Ilya has really been the guy. So I think the hope is that it's no big deal. And all indications are, I think at this point, that it isn't a big deal until, something else would maybe crop up. But I think he's probably all right. Vitek Vanacek getting closer to being available again, too, one would think, coming back and finally seeing a little bit of ice this week. So I think between those two, I mean, you still have the elephant in the room a little bit. Neither of these guys has gotten into the Stanley Cup playoffs for any significant amount of time. They got split between them one series last year against Boston, but that's it. Do you, if you're Brian McClellan, look for a veteran goaltender to have on standby come playoff time? I don't know that we know the answer to that yet. I mean, I think when you went back to the beginning of November, you might have thought maybe that's the way they go. I think Ilya, for the most part, has done really well. I think that he's made a lot of big saves for this team. He certainly won some games on goaltending alone. Maybe when the Capitals would have been some slow starts of late. I think he's made some big stops when he's needed to. So I think his progression's gone pretty well. And Vitek is a little bit more of an incomplete at this point for this season, just because he hadn't played a lot. We just haven't seen a whole lot of him lately. And, he was good. I wouldn't say outstanding or great at the beginning of the year, but he was certainly good. And I think they have the chance. And once you start getting more games, see what you have between now and the trade deadline, maybe deciding whether or not you want to have that veteran or if you want to go with the kids and head on toward the postseason.
Well, that's why Craig Anderson was so important last year, of course, and saving the day in the first couple of games of that series. Hey, I'll tell you right now, if the Caps are going to try to buy a goaltender, they're going to have to fight Kenny Holland, because boy, is Edmonton having problems up there right now with their goaltending situation. But we do obviously got to look up this coming weekend, back-to-back, the first back-to-back of the new year, first back-to-back in a while for the Capitals. If Vanacek isn't ready to go, what then? Do we see Samsonov get back-to-back? Or, because I believe Phoenix Copley was the guy that was on the taxi squad. Does he get the nod in one of the two games this weekend?
Well, I think if for some reason VTech isn't able to, Phoenix would be the guy. But it sounds like that, VTech would probably be a legitimate option, I would imagine, in Minnesota at XL on Saturday night. But I think we'll have a better picture on that as we get closer to the weekend. I think right now, just making sure that Elia is able to get through a couple of more practices, team leaving for St. Louis, and then the game, of course, on Friday night. So one more chance at home before heading out. You've got to make those kinds of decisions. But I would say Elia against the Blues. But to your point, Tyler, I mean, this is a stretch of where you haven't had a lot of games, and now you've got a really difficult 3 and 4 because you've got a St. Louis team that is playing very well and no reason to think that they're not going to be in the conversation in the West. Minnesota has stumbled a little bit lately, most notably in the Winter Classic, but Dean Evason's, the body of work this year for the Wild has been overall pretty good. And you're going to get them in a back-to-back where, you may not be as fresh as you might have been being the road team and coming into St. Paul. So, and then all you get after that is a flight home and a little bit of rest and then turn around and play the Bruins on Monday. So it's a difficult stretch. And when you're coming off the loss against St. Louis, I think one of the most difficult things for the Capitals this week has been you lost to a team you shouldn't have lost to on Sunday. And you kind of had to eat it for a few days because you didn't have a chance to get right back at it. So I think come Friday, I think they'll be ready to go. I think that being able to get back into action and put that Devils game behind them is important. But it does start a pretty rugged stretch, and then you've got another gap next week where you've got a lot of time before playing the Islanders a week from Saturday. So it has been one of the strangest stretches of schedule I've ever seen, Tyler, and a lot of it, I think a lot of teams can certainly say that, not just Washington. In fact, there's a lot of teams out there that have had it worse than Washington, a lot of teams out of action right now. But to be able all these fits and starts in and around all the injuries and the illnesses, COVID and non-COVID, it's been difficult. I think it's, just knowing one game to the next what you're going to do has certainly been a challenge for this coaching staff.
Yeah, and that's going to make things really interesting later on because a lot of these games are getting moved because Canadian teams are trying to push them later in the year so they could have more fans in attendance. Obviously, Toronto and Edmonton on Wednesday night played in front of no fans at Scotiabank Arena. Toronto and on Ottawa this past Saturday was also in front of no fans. They're just trying to. That's more. I mean, I talked about it on Locked On NHL with Mike DiStefano on Tuesday. We talked about that's literally a TV money thing, but we talk about how sporadic the schedule is going to be. And it's pushing towards the fact that we're going to see some hockey games in February where we didn't think we were going to see many at all prior to the season. Obviously, COVID kind of has really thrown a wrench in the plans of both the players and the league itself. Do we have an idea of if or how many games Washington's going to play and what was going to be the Olympic break?
Well, we don't know for sure, but I think you would look at the 4 that they haven't been able to play yet getting plugged in there in some way, shape, or form. I put a little asterisk by that because I don't know what they're going to do with that game in Montreal, but they've got a date with Ottawa at Capital One Arena to make up. I don't think that one's going to be all that difficult. Then they've got a couple of road games in relative close proximity to the district. They've got to go to Philadelphia and they've got to go to the New York Islanders. So I think at least 3 and hopefully all 4 they're able to make up. And if that's the case and you don't have any other issues the rest of the way, you will complete the schedule as it was assigned to you. And if you have to plug in the Montreal game somewhere else, I thought it was interesting. I saw Bill Daly had an interview that he had done yesterday, and I was interested to see that, he was very honest in saying, look, they've still got the room now and thinking for more some of these Canadian teams that will no doubt some of them play the entire month of February. I don't know that they really have a whole lot more runway to not have the issue with the fans go away for them. I think there's a real chance they're going to have to play in February, whether there's fans or not. And some of them are going to have to go the whole month. There isn't seemingly an appetite to play beyond the 29th of April, which is certainly understandable.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look around, and the Capitals have it a lot better than most, if you're looking at squeezing in 4 games, if you need to put only 3 of those in February, you don't have tough travel for them. Ottawa will come to you, and then Montreal's a 6-5 and pick them on whether it happens in February or not. Hopefully it does. But if that's it, I think the Capitals have it a lot better than most, and I think there's a real good chance that, if they can get into the 1st of March and, we get to something – I mean, what's normal anymore? But it's something closer to normal.
The new normal. The new normal.
Yeah, the new normal. Exactly.
But and that's the thing too, because some people, I mean, it's it's easier said than done because I have people ask me all the time, like, well, Tyler, if all these games are postponed, like next week, Monday through Saturday, the Capitals have all the time off. Why don't they put the Ottawa game in there? Why don't they just put this game here? There's a lot of the logistic things that go into it. Obviously, these teams have to travel somewhere. You have to obviously make sure that can work out. Also, arena availability, because this is not minor hockey, kids, where you can just, hey, let's just go play at the rink across town. You have to play in your barn, especially with all the COVID protocols. This is not something that's like snap of the fingers, because if that were the case, the World Juniors would still be going on, John.
Right. And to that point, Capital One Arena has a lot of events and a lot of concerts in February. So there really aren't a lot of dates in February. I'm perhaps being a little cavalier and saying, no problem. But, they only have to find really a home for that Ottawa game. And it's my understanding that there is at least one date that should be mutually agreeable, and that may very well work. But the road games, you're right. I mean, what's at Wells Fargo Center? And, I was even thinking that you had a chance this week with the Islanders getting their Western Canadian trip wiped out and the Capitals were here. I mean, theoretically, you could have had a game between these two teams. It's not that far to get to Uniondale or Belmont, I guess now.
Let's say I'm like, nope, different barn.
Yeah, different barn, but relatively same location, same airfield you're landing at anyway. And to be able to get there and do that, I think their confidence level is pretty high. You can find a home for that one anyway. So, I think the real fear is, and we even, obviously the games got canceled at the end 2 seasons ago where nobody really got a chance nobody got in anything close to 82. I don't know that we're out of the woods yet as far as that happening this year. And you may end up reverting to a points percentage kind of thing because if you're one of these Canadian teams right now, if there's anything else that hiccups along the way and you can't play games or this outbreak continues longer than people think, I don't think you just math isn't there. You're not going to be able to get 82 games in by April 29. So perhaps the scenario then would be extending the season by a week if you absolutely had to maintain the integrity of an 82 game season. But this has just been such a headache for the National Hockey League, and I'm sure that they will be thrilled to have what is a quote-unquote normal season again at some point. But one thing we know right now, Tyler, is this is not going to be one of those.
No, not at all. And that's why they're trying to push as hard as they can to get the season done by the end of April, because typically by the end of April, we're talking about round 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, because the National Hockey League is doing everything they can to not have the cup be awarded after Independence Day in the U.S. or Canada Day for our friends north of the border, because, we like free agent frenzy day on July 1st. That was always a holiday for all of us. So that's why I think they want to get back to, like we said, that lovely word that we just don't know what it is anymore. Normal, John, normal.
Yeah, we've got to get to that point, and you're right. You don't want to get the offseason eaten too much into again after what's happened the last couple of years. But I guess they're going to do what they have to do, and we'll probably know more here in the coming days. And I would think certainly by the middle of February, we're going to have a much better idea on where everything stands.
We'll just have to all wait and see. John, thanks again for stopping by. As always, be sure to follow him, guys, at John Walton PXP on Twitter. He also does Caps This Morning, every morning, recapping the night's games or just the daily worth of news around the Washington Capitals, just like us. So you can listen to him, listen to us, get your squared amount of Capitals knowledge and news every day. John, thanks again for stopping by.
You bet, Tyler, anytime.
And a huge thank you once again to John Walton for stopping by. Always a fun guy to talk to about the Washington Capitals, getting ready for the weekend set. Hopefully these injuries kind of pan out. While I have you guys here for a minute, let's look at the games we have on tap tonight. Typically a normal Thursday, only 2 postponed games, that being the Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens and the Ottawa Senators and the Seattle Kraken. Those games are not going to be played. However, a full slate of hockey action. Minnesota in Beantown taking on the Bruins. Big game there for the Wild. They're trying to get off this little schneid they're on. Boston starting to find their way. They're in 4th in the Atlantic Division, trying to stay there as well. Speaking of the Atlantic, Buffalo hosting San Jose, part of their East Coast swing before they go back home. Tampa Bay, after a pretty good game, taking on Calgary, who is trying to, kind of forget that they played Florida the other night, despite all those chances. Hopefully they don't get double rushed into goaltenders, because, oh boy, did Sergei Bobrovsky shut the door on them on Tuesday. The Columbus Blue Jackets take on the New Jersey Devils. Columbus had not a good time at all the other night. They're going to try to get back into New Jersey, who also lost on Tuesday. Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, the Battle of Pennsylvania. That'll be another 7 o'clock game. That'll be the ESPN plus Hulu game, if you will. Dallas taking on Florida. Florida hotter than anything. They've been scoring at will against any of their opponents. Dallas looks like they try to thwart that. Winnipeg and Colorado, a big key Central Division battle in Denver. Arizona is going to be hosting the Chicago Blackhawks. Vegas and the Rangers. That is going to be a fun one to watch, as will possibly the Anaheim Ducks and the Detroit Red Wings at the Pond, Honda Center, if you want to call it that. The two Calder candidates, Trevor Zegras and Lucas Raymond, going head-to-head out there. And the last game of the night, the 10:30 start time, Nashville and LA. LA trying to stay in that Pacific Division picture. Nashville trying to stay towards the top of the Central Division. Boy, oh boy, so much fun action on this Thursday night. But that is it, though, for this edition, folks, of Locked On Capitals. Thank you all very much for listening and watching. As always, be sure to follow us at Locked On Caps on Twitter. Follow me, the Insider of the Insiders, Tyler Kuehl. You see it right there on the bottom. TJKU29, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. That's right, kids. I'll be posting something funny here on TikTok. Good hockey talk, though. Useless hockey talk, as I like to call it, though. Tomorrow, though, we got another guest coming on, JJ Reagan from NBC Sports Washington. He'll be back to talk to us about the Capitals and get ready for the weekend set, including the games against St. Louis and Minnesota. And hopefully, no real negative injury updates. Let's hope so. We'll see you all tomorrow here on Locked On Caps.